Okay, here we are in our kitchen, here to talk about boundaries and boundaries relating to behaviour.
Okay.
So, tell us a little bit first, Ashley, about your education journey.
Okay, so I started out as a teaching assistant in an umbrella SEMH school working with a 9-year-old who was autistic and had a lot of social, emotional, mental health difficulties, a lot of attachment issues. And that was a real learning curve for me. Sent me into my PGC, so I became a teacher, worked in autism schools for a couple of years in London. Then I moved to Sheffield and did a little stint in early years, which I really, really liked. And then moved on to social, emotional, mental health schools.
So, you work in a specialist school now, you have done for some years. All the children have EHCPs, and their primary need would be social, emotional, mental health needs.
Yeah, secondary needs, autism, ADHD, attachment.
And you're working with, well, I think historically worked with kind of younger children, kind of 7 upwards, and now you're with slightly older children.
Yeah, now I'm with year 7s. My first year with year 7s. I loved it. It's so fun.
Lovely. So, next question. How do you manage the balance between nurturing and supporting your children in a trauma-informed way while maintaining boundaries around behaviour?
I don't think those two things are separate. I think we can really make the mistake of thinking trauma-informed means that we never put them in a difficult situation. We never allow them to have a difficult feeling, which is unrealistic. They're going to have difficult feelings. We all do. So for me, it's about, being really stable for them as the adult in the room that's going to, might be the only stable adult in their life. And consistently having an expectation. For me, that's the boundary. I'm going to consistently have the expectation that you wear the right uniform, that you are sat down listening in a lesson. And that doesn't mean that you might not have a weighted blanket on your lap and I'm going to meet your individual needs. I'm going to make sure that you've run a lap around the playground before that lesson because I know that you've got some sensory needs that need to be met. I might let you have a bowl of grapes because you haven't eaten that morning, but this lesson still needs to happen. Your tummy still needs to be full. So it's about expectations within the lesson. The boundary is, no matter what your need is, I'm going to see to it, but we're going to get the lesson done.
And I think it doesn't
That's
mean
the expectation.
It doesn't mean that children will always stay within that expectation. They might but that doesn't mean your boundary isn't going to stay there.
Children will always push a boundary. They're always testing it, even in the most stable of relationships. We have a 2-year-old that shows us that constantly. We're constantly pressing the boundary. And, for children who are used to the boundaries being non-existent or changing every day or here, there, everywhere, different with mum, different with dad, different with nan, different at school, that's the child that you've got to be the most consistent with. You need to be so predictable. So that boundary needs to be held.
And not, and being boundaried and firm and clear and being nurturing, like you said, they are actually the same thing. Nurturing isn't just care and love and soft voices. It's actually also about firmness. It's about calm. It's about I'm in charge. And again, when we often sort of relate things to parenting a toddler, we hold those boundaries not only because of, that's what we need, but more importantly and first and foremost, it's because that's what she needs, and it's preparing her for life. So boundary holding should be very much the spirit of holding boundaries and having high behavioural expectations is about what that child needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that might differ from child to child, but the expectation will be the same.
Yeah. Thank you. So how would you recommend addressing behaviour with a child who has low self-esteem and may feel shame easily, and particularly those who might have a really escalated response to you addressing their behaviour?
That's like every SEMH child, every child with a social, emotional, mental health difficulty, and lots of the others. I would have felt great shame if I'd been told off as a child. If I got something wrong, I would have been in floods of tears, because kids are sensitive. But I think it's being boundaried with them shouldn't be any different. I think what you fundamentally start with when you're being nurturing, when you're being trauma informed, is a relationship. And I think everything has to come back to your relationship with that child. So you need to know that if a child has a really hair trigger for shame, you need to know what the way is that you can communicate disapproval to them. I've got a child that absolutely shuts down, will abscond if I even say, what's that? Or like,
oh, look at this again, or even the most
a lot of the
innocuous,
time he won't even pick up his sheet because he's so underconfident. But I'm not going to go like, oh, you're finding this really hard, don't worry about maths, don't worry about it, do you want to have a biscuit? Of course not, because that's not caring. I care about him. I want him to achieve things. I want him to go on to his next lesson, his next teacher, his next setting, with the confidence to know that he can do hard things. So I'm going to meet his need, I'm going to connect with him, and then I'm going to, I might have a bit of humour, and then I'm going to redirect, and I might help him with whatever he needs help with, make sure he's got a resource or a friend, or maybe he needs a completely different approach. That's fine, but he's still going to do the work. If I've got another type of child who feels shame but isn't going to sit there quietly, is maybe bouncing around the room and being really loud, but if I say, Jimmy, what are you doing? It's going to escalate him. I've got to be really, really smart at that point, because I might as the adult be feeling angry that he's disrupting my lesson or any of these things. I need to really couch that feeling, just practice my own red zone tools, deep breaths, have some water. And then I think it's about knowing for that child how I can distract him. So a lot of time for me it's humour. I might say, hey, Jimmy, you donut, what's going on over there? Are you a bouncing bunny? And then actually, do you know what? I need you to do me a job. Can you fetch me some more water? My water bottle's run out.
Distraction,
or I'm cold,
redirection.
Can you get me a cardigan? Have you tested out this new cushion in our seating area? If he needs something sensory at that point, you've got to know what the need is and address it without being... I'm not saying you can never be cross. You can be cross. But
you've got to be controlled. It's got to be controlled. And I think sometimes redirection and distraction in the moment and then a subsequent discussion can be really, really important.
Absolutely. And, we'll get that wrong sometimes. I've definitely shouted at a child in the moment when I've been stressed and other things have been going wrong. And, that's potentially damaged our relationship. And you've got to understand that child needs an apology at that point, because no one should be shouted at. And if you do shout, it's fine. It might happen in the moment, but you then need to reconnect and you need to say, do you know what? I shouldn't have shouted. What was going on for me then was that I was tired and this was happening, that made me stress. And then I don't know what was going on with you. You were having some hard feelings about this work, but I shouldn't have shouted. And you're far more likely at that point then to get them saying, well, I just didn't like that work, or oh, maths really stresses me out. And at that point you can connect and come up with a solution to move forward so that hopefully it won't happen again.
Thank you. So if you suspect that maintaining a boundary with a child may result in an unsafe or perhaps scary behavioural response, how do you navigate that?
I think that goes to handling. You need to know how to handle a child. You need to have, your team teach or your skip training. And I think more often, when we're physically confident with how we might physically hold a child to keep them safe or you safe, or, stop them trashing a classroom, because that shouldn't happen. Then actually a lot of the time you have to use it less and less, because that child feels safe with you.
They feel your confidence in that situation. And
it allows you to go into that situation much calmer, so you're less likely to escalate them, because they're not feeding off all of the nervous energy that you've got.
But we talk a lot, don't we, about the importance of, even if you think they might have a big reaction or even a sort of dangerous reaction to a boundary, is that you still hold boundaries.
Of course.
I mean, you need to think about getting your team around, so other adults who can support, that you're not being a lone warrior. But I think with the children who have the biggest responses to boundaries are almost those who need the boundaries the most.
Definitely. And they need them from every single adult, in every single room, in the most loving of ways. But those boundaries need to be held. And actually I think that once you've been holding them consistently for however amount of time that child needs, all of those high level behaviours drop away, because the child feels safe.
And the other thing obviously to point out is that if there are kind of high level dangerous behaviours, that if that happens once, then there should be a plan afterwards. It should
Yeah.
never be a surprise again.
The team teach saying is, if it's predictable, it's preventable.
Yeah, thank you. So last question. We know that consistency is important for children, including around behavioural messages, as a class. But how do you balance the need for consistency for your whole class with the knowledge that individual children have different needs?
I think in several ways. I think it goes back to relationships. I think you meet Jimmy's need where he is, and you meet Diane's need where she is, and you've got to be that bit of a chameleon. You've got to be able to say, I'm going to do this for you and this for you. And sometimes are you hinting at children maybe?
Well, yeah, this is a message that I get sometimes from adults is, I'm afraid if I have a different behavioural response or differentiate my behavioural response, the other children might see that as inconsistency, that might undermine my sense of authority. It's a concern that comes up.
I think I kind of feel like that's an adult's perspective of the children might think.
Yeah.
Because I think generally children are really empathetic. I think children clock a lot more than we give them credit for. Children know who sits at the red table and who sits at the blue table. They're smart. And I think they know that Jimmy needs the iPad for the second half of maths.
Yeah.
Or between English and art. Like, I think they understand these things much better than we give them credit for, and I think they're often really empathetic to each other's needs. I think if you have got like individual cases where a child or a set of children are saying like, oh, that's not fair, he's getting, that child might have a need themselves that they feel isn't being addressed, and that just might be a quick sort of connecting conversation. So you know that Jimmy needs that. You can see that Jimmy needs that. Do you not agree? And I would bat it back to them like, well, what would you give Jimmy then? What do you think should be the rules of the classroom? Because my rule is that everybody gets what they need, and that's what Jimmy needs.
Yeah.
And I think, bat it back to them, but also, take it as a good PSHE opportunity. Connect with the children if they feel like something's not fair. Talk to them about it. But ultimately, you have to command that room.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I think a lot of the time that doesn't happen in my school. I think because, we're all taught to have such a commanding presence in our rooms that, honestly, I don't think the children would even question what we're doing.
That people need different things.
Yeah,
I think that's it's a wider learning point for children around diversity and about inclusivity. And some people need glasses, some people need hearing aids, some people need a wheelchair, some people need a sensory fiddle, some people need a break outside during a lesson, and that's because we all have different needs. And I think we're sometimes a little more afraid of that than we need to be.
Yeah, I think that's almost like a referendum on you as the teacher, because I think if you are commanding that class with your body language, your tone of voice, your presentation, your delivery of everything, your relationships with each individual child, then I think they won't question what you're doing, because they'll know that it comes from the right place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's us.
You're welcome.